Hey, welcome back to the S&S College Football Podcast. This is the Conference Championship Week episode. Tonight you have myself, obviously, and then we have Dave from Houston, aka Tulman. Addison is apparently too busy for Conference Championship Week. Steele's been a busy dad for like 2 years.
These games kind of suck anyway. So
Yeah,
I guess I get it.
and these games really aren't the best this year. There's not like a ton of meaning to them. I mean, there's a little. We'll talk about it, obviously. We're gonna start. I think again, like what T. We're not gonna really recap last week. Everybody knows OSU killed Michigan again. Auburn with a crazy victory over Alabama. That was actually a really fun Iron Bowl to watch. But we're gonna get right into our winners and losers. Real quick, just because I don't want to do this at the end because I don't want to forget. Before we get into all this, as far as the pod schedule for you guys that actually do watch, kind of like on a regular basis, at least, starting this year maybe, for bowl season, I think we're going to we talked about doing an award episode where we have like some actual like kind of awards that maybe we talk about, like some funny stuff. But then we'll have we're not going to probably talk about a lot of the earlier bowl games. We might throw out on Twitter like some of our picks for those if we do bet them. But I think we're going to save our time and energy for like bowls that matter.
Don't we already have our first pick, like the over in the Bahamas Bowl? Doesn't that happen every
year?
Yeah, you can go ahead and lock that in.
Yeah,
whichever teams are playing.
I don't know if you guys saw it or if you viewers or UT, but I think what's his name, Hewley for Charlotte. Like they're gonna have a blast down there. Like that, nobody cares about that game. Those teams don't really care to practice. Like they're practicing, but it's more for like to get young guys reps to get better for next year since they earn those bowl practices as a program. That's why it's important to make a bowl still. I think that's way more important than the bowl games. You get those extra practices. But yeah, Bahamas Bowl probably over. It's probably like a blind, just whatever the total is, bet the over. But yeah, so T, let's get into the winners and losers for the week. I'll let you start with whichever side you want to go with.
So, in honor of Addison being gone, we're going to start with losers tonight because I have a ton of losers to talk about.
Excellent.
This was more of a losing week.
Yes.
So
go for it.
Let's start with Auburn fans.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay. Storming the field was absolutely atrocious. You can't. They should know this. Like they learned this in like Southern etiquette classes. If you're wearing fancy dresses and heels, you do not jump into hedges. Like there is multiple footage of people just fucking up.
Yeah.
And that one girl just blindly followed her boyfriend who was just holding up a shrub. Like
yeah.
I think she can do better than that.
Yeah, she can definitely do better.
Anyways, they're getting stuck in the hedges, which I guess was storming the field, cost them a $250,000 fine.
Oh wow, so, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, because SEC has like weird field and basketball court storming rules, and now we probably see why, because it was just like a stupid thing for them to do.
Yeah.
With that just beast of a barrier in front of them.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, insane.
So, staying in the SEC, we've got Elijah Moore, the wide receiver and kick returner from Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Started off, earlier in the game, he had one of the funniest, fair catches, but not I've ever seen. He didn't signal for a fair catch. He caught the ball, and then he decided to fair catch afterwards as he was getting pummeled to the ground. So that probably would not have gotten him the loser of the week. But what elevates him to probably the loser of the week was the fake dog pee celebration in the end zone.
Yeah.
They scored the final minute. They brought it. It was 21-20. Fake P sets him back 15 yards. Of course, when that happens, karma, you're going to miss the extra point, and Ole Miss loses the Egg Bowl. But what furthermore vaults him into potentially like the loser of the year is Matt Luke got fired after that game,
Yeah.
and now half the team is transferring.
So this guy who decided to pretend like he's pissing like a dog not only costs his team the rivalry game, but also cost Matt Luke his job, and half the team is leaving. It's absurd.
I think we might have the loser of the person, like loser of the year.
Dude,
that
he's
guy.
definitely a candidate, like no question. Yeah, for that. Yeah. Oh, that's pretty bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Staying in the SEC. Paul Feinbaum.
Oh, yeah.
So he, of course, he went on my least favorite show that I don't watch, but I am on Twitter. So,
right.
You know, I saw this on Twitter. He said, nobody wants to see Utah in the college football playoff. And I could not completely disagree.
Yeah.
If you've watched Utah play this year, really fun team to watch. And, okay, for those of you that are in the camp that LSU should be number one, LSU versus Oklahoma in the potential 1-4 matchup, LSU will torch Oklahoma's defense if that happens. I don't think there would be any resistance there.
None, yeah.
But LSU against Utah in a potential 1-4 matchup, that's exciting. Both teams pretty good in the trenches. I think Utah could put up a good fight against them. So I would much, much rather see an LSU-Utah matchup, and I think Utah's played well enough to be very, very deserving of that 4 spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think even if OSU ends up number one, I think Utah would give them a little bit of a better challenge than Oklahoma would too. And that's going to be interesting because there's a lot of like conspiracy theories that how the committee's ranking these teams to like set up certain teams for, either seeding purposes or like setting up Oklahoma to be able to jump Utah. But when Feinbaum,
yeah, I mean, they put Oklahoma State, which inexplicably they're like 24th or 25th.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
Like I didn't like that.
Yeah, and I think Feinbaum, like, if I had to guess, how many quarters of Utah football has Feinbaum watched this year?
He probably is in bed by like 7 p.m. Whenever the 3:30 SEC game finishes, he probably drinks a warm glass of milk and goes to bed.
Like, I would set that line at 0.5, and I would take the under. I don't think he's watched a snap of Utah football. So when he says stupid shit like that, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, Utah is definitely a deserving team, especially if they we're going to get into that game, but especially if they like smacked Oregon around or something. But even if they don't, even if they just win the game, they've been much more dominant in their conference, compared to Oklahoma, which you could argue should have lost maybe 2 other games this year already. I think Feinbaum's definitely a loser. Any other losers you got?
Yeah, this is going to be my transition to you because, of course, we have to have reasons why Jim Harbaugh is a loser.
Yeah.
But my number one reason why he's a loser is because he got asked a simple question, what is the difference between Michigan and an Ohio State?
Yeah.
You could have said anything. You could have said, like, degrees of latitude, like Michigan is further north or something like that. But instead, you chose to answer with it. You gave the answer, I answer questions, not insults. That's, like, the simplest question ever. Like, what the fuck, dude?
And, bro, it's not – the score is the insult. Like, it's not – it's just asking simply, why is this the way that it is? And – sorry if your feelings get hurt, but you either need to recruit better and or develop talent better or coach better, like all of the above. OSU is winning every single battle. It's only getting worse. If you look at the next couple recruiting classes, and obviously, this day and age, these kids could flip and stuff, but OSU, I think I saw for next year they have like 8 or 9 guys that are ranked higher than Michigan's highest rated recruit. So this is only getting worse. And I agree, Tulman, like that. You kind of like took the words out of my mouth. That was the one thing that stuck out for me from that day. It wasn't even from the game. It was just from him after just being such a sore loser. Like, I get that you're emotional after the game. You are going to have to answer these questions all off season again. But it's a valid question. So, you said transition to me now?
Yeah.
All right, so he obviously was a loser. Michigan football in general is a loser for losing the way that they did to Ohio State again. Michigan front seven just getting absolutely bitched the whole game. I thought there were certain guys on Michigan that did perform. I thought the tight ends played well. I thought Shea Patterson, especially in the first half, he was balling out, and there were some adjustments that were made in the second half. Combined with Michigan's playmakers not really helping him out, a lot of self-inflicted wounds that I think made the game definitely, as far as the margin of victory, is a little bit wider than it probably should have been. But Michigan was never winning that football game, and for all the shit talking, not like a ton of it, but just there's a lot more confidence building up this week from Blue fans. They were this past week. They felt there's a lot of them that I felt like actually did think they could win the game. I think the more realistic ones thought that maybe Michigan could make it a little scary. Maybe they cover. I thought, when we previewed that game, we said that was a possibility. But Michigan, just overall, everything Michigan's a loser.
And now how the tide has turned. If you look at their team fan boards now, like it's how can we buy a 5-star
yeah.
Comparing Jim Harbaugh to John Cooper, which as Ohio State fans is you don't want to be in that position. I mean, there's some sad things on there.
Yeah, and the one that gets me a little bit is, and this doesn't represent, this is the thing is you have when you have large fan bases, obviously there's going to be a faction of them that are just idiots or assholes or whatever, and when there's a good amount that say things like, well, OSU cheats, or OSU gets more calls from the refs, or OSU's players are allowed to just take online classes, so it's easier for them to focus on football. That's all just a bunch of lame-ass horseshit. It's just that OSU is recruited better, they're coaching better. More importantly, I think the biggest thing is they're developing talent better. Michigan has had a few pretty good recruiting classes under Harbaugh, and their players are kind of flaming out in the NFL. Rashawn Gary, for example, #1 high school recruit in the nation. The Packers are going to cut him this year. They literally are going to cut a first-round pick. I mean,
was he a second-round pick?
He was first round. He was the 12th overall pick.
He was 12th overall pick, and the Packers are going to cut him.
I have strong reason to believe via some sources on Twitter that they are seriously considering cutting him. So,
wow.
Yeah, one guy, but look at all the OSU players from the last 7 years that have gone to the NFL. They're just developed better, and it's a wide.
You know what though? Look, it's well documented. I haven't watched really any NFL this year, but I think that Winovich has been pretty good. I think Devin Bush has been pretty good.
Devin Bush. I thought Devin Bush pound for pound might have been the best player in the draft last year, so I'll give them that. Winovich has been pretty solid,
but they've had no. Any guy that gets drafted is not it's not some special speed guy like a dynamic Charles Woodson at corner or it's just guys that can fill a roster spot.
Yeah, overall. And we talked about this a little bit. Would you agree that I agree with Addison that Michigan needs to recruit Ohio? I'm not sure why Harbaugh's not, I don't know if it's just this thing where he's that guy where he's well, I'm a Michigan man, I don't need to recruit Ohio. But when Michigan was consistently beating OSU in the 90s, when they were, Big Ten and national title contenders each year, they had a lot of their key positions were filled by kids from Ohio because there's just not as many kids in Michigan. There's not as good of high school football as far as depth-wise as you'll find in Ohio. I think they need to recruit Ohio a little bit more. Get some kids that Ohio State passes on. You already have that built-in hate. I think that would help them as far as, maybe giving their program, I don't know, a little more care as far as that game's concerned. Even you have Fields coming in who's from the South, didn't know really much about this rivalry until he got here. And 12 months later, he's saying that they just don't care about it like we do. I mean, it's insane to me.
Yeah.
So
I feel like earlier in the decade, Michigan State was doing a good job of recruiting guys from Ohio.
Yeah, for sure.
That Ohio State was passing on and getting in some really competitive games and beating Ohio State.
I think Michigan Yeah, that's a perfect point to end.
So if Michigan State can do that, Michigan should be able to do it better.
Exactly. It's the perfect transition into like getting ending the loser segment. Is that I heard somebody say that the other day. I don't know if I read it or if it was on the radio. It couldn't be the radio because the local guys aren't smart enough. But like if Michigan can be the rich man's version of Michigan State, they would be totally fine. They could win the Big Ten. They could go to the playoff. Maybe you're not going to be like a consistent national title contender like OSU, Clemson, Bama, whatever. But I agree with you. I think if they took that route, I think they'd be better off than whatever the hell Harbaugh's doing right now. So
speaking of loser of the year candidates,
yeah, yeah.
Antonio.
Oh God, yeah. They're not worthy of our time tonight. But
yeah, no,
that's
they'll
definitely.
They'll have something special on the award show.
Oh man, I can't wait to rip them. They ruined. I had over bet on them for season win total. They fucking suck. Excuse the f bomb, but yeah. So let's get into winners now. I guess I'll just go and then I'll let you go after me, and then we'll go into conspiracy corner. So quickly here, Ohio State O-line. I mean, if Michigan's front seven was a loser, Ohio State's O-line, J.K. Dobbins, Fields, asserted their will in that game. Really was impressed by Fields as far as being very, I think, nervous in the beginning of that game, not being quite ready for that kind of environment. I was quite worried. A lot of his balls were off. He just seemed a little rattled. And then he settled down, took a couple shots that maybe he needed to take, to be honest. And I think that got him into the flow of the game, and they really played very well. Virginia football, first time in 15 years, I believe, that they finally beat Virginia Tech. Sorry, Corey from Denver, but I had to throw Virginia.
All the way back to Matt Schaub.
Yeah, dude, I had to throw Virginia and Bronco Mendenhall in here. I mean, he took over a program that Mike London's last year they were like 2-10, and yeah, and they
were like the epitome of Carruthers.
Yeah, dude, like cream puff soft, like really just really bad. But and he still doesn't even have like that much talent in there. But he did a great job this year. I mean, they won more games than I thought they were going to win. They're going to get murdered by Clemson. We're not even previewing the ACC title game. Here's your quick ACC preview. Clemson wins the ACC, everybody. They're probably going to cover as well. But I have to give credit to them. Gus Malzahn. I mean, this is a guy that's been on the hot seat for, I feel like every year this guy's on the hot seat. And he is what Michigan fans would love out of Harbaugh. Auburn's consistently competitive against the SEC, like big boys, so to speak. For now, like I consider Auburn like a big boy, but like they compete against Georgia. They can beat Georgia. They've beaten Bama a few times.
They beat Bama at home.
Right. So I mean, I think that he should get a lot more credit, and he's a really good play caller. I think with Bo Nix, they feel very confident about what they can do over the next couple of years. If they can fill a couple of those D-line spots, which it's Auburn, they should. I think they're going to be in great shape. My last winner, as far as I have one more coach, Jeff Brom. Now, Purdue had a bad record this year. When we previewed the Big Ten West, we said that we were going to be a little bit down on Purdue. But with all the injuries, being down to a walk-on fourth-string quarterback, this team was still very competitive. They almost beat Indiana last weekend. He did a phenomenal job last year. This is a team that I am targeting next year for a season win total over. He's got to be a winner for me, though. I mean, team total
under hit this year. They're like a good over candidate next year, whereas Minnesota team total over this year could be a good under candidate next year.
Likely, yeah. They're losing a lot of talent. I question PJ's ability to fill those spots right now. Now, in a few years, if he gets a couple of his classes in there, that could be good. But yeah, I totally agree. Your winners, and then conspiracy corner.
Sure. Joe Burrow's senior night. This was like a personal favorite of mine because
Heisman winner Joe Burrow.
Having lived in Louisiana as long as I did, they let an adopted Ohio boy come out wearing the spelling his last name with the E-A-U-X, Joe Burrow.
Right.
Which I just freaking love that. Like when I saw that, I was like tearing up a little bit. I thought that was just like really, really cool. And of course, like he's done all year, he put on a show. So I love how Louisiana has adopted Joe Burrow from Ohio.
Yeah, obviously he's going to win the Heisman. Obviously deserving. He's 100% a candidate for Player of the Year on this pod. I mean, this kid. Knowing a good amount about him, just being in the OSU program, knowing guys that know his family down in Southeast Ohio, he's just good family, good kid. Did everything he could to try to win that OSU job, and honestly, I know guys within the program that said if he wouldn't have broken his wrist, there was a decent shot that he beat Haskins out that year for the job. And we're seeing why. He is very good. I was thinking after JT left that was the guy that I was hoping we'd get. And, the way things transpired, it hasn't been so bad. He had the best statistical season in the history of OSU football. Justin Fields comes in. He might lead us to a national championship. Who knows? But, yeah, Burrow, couldn't be happier for the kid. I hope that he can stay healthy and gets drafted high in the NFL to a franchise that isn't just total dog shit like the Bengals. But
I'd hate that.
Yeah. So but yeah, totally agree. Joey Burrow,
okay.
Man.
And then my last winner is a program that's in a really, really good spot right now. Is Kentucky. So expectations were not that high this year, given all of the NFL talent that they lost last year.
Yeah.
Josh, Allen, Benny Snell, their all-time leading rusher.
Right.
Season started off this year. They were ravaged by injuries at the quarterback position to the point where pretty much the entire second half, maybe even more than that, they had to play Lynn Bowden, just kind of an athletic guy at quarterback who, is attempting 4 to 6 passes per game. But they drew up such a good scheme that by the end of the year, they're now like I think they're the number 1 efficient rushing offense. Correct me if I'm wrong, or at least in the top 5.
I think it's close. Yeah, I can look it up while you're talking there.
And they're completely one-dimensional. So they line up. Other teams know what they're going to do, and they've just devised a scheme to allow Lynn Bowden to kind of run wild with that offense. So. Just a major credit to Mark Stoops. Their season total, their win total went over. I didn't think it would, even with all the stuff that they had to deal with. And I think if they can get some good recruits and they can get some talent in there, they have the infrastructure to be really successful in the SEC East.
Yeah, Stoops is doing a great job. Lynn Bowden, another Player of the Year candidate. Just unselfish to move to a position that he just doesn't play. Maybe he didn't even want to play, but he sacrificed for the team. And I'm impressed with what Kentucky is doing. I agree. They could be, I think, a thorn in Georgia and Florida's side the next few years here. So, yeah, definitely.
Yep. All right, I think that's it for winners this week.
Yep.
So we'll go into. So there's no conspiracies right now as to how Alabama can jump up and get into the number 4 spot for the college football playoff. I think the committee made that pretty clear. They dropped them all the way down to 12. So tonight was going to be the night where I come up with some crazy scenario and some psychological things as to how Alabama can get in, but that's not going to happen. Actually. I'll give credit to the Bear here. He came up with the reverse conspiracy that the committee dropped Alabama down to 12 so that because they know that whatever bowl Alabama gets into, half the guys are gonna sit, because don't want to get hurt and go to the NFL, and they're just not going to care. I mean, we've seen Bama in that situation before.
Yeah.
So Bear said they dropped them down to 12 because the committee didn't want them to get into a New Year's Six bowl. So we're not going to be hearing from Bama much in the postseason. So no real conspiracy there. But the fun announcement that we have about Conspiracy Corner is that I've been putting together my top 3 conspiracy corners of the decade in honor of the decade coming to close. We've had some saucy topics over the last 10 years. And we'll be revealing that during the award show. So y'all should tune into that, because if you like debts to bookies, we'll have some discussion on that
Hell
in
yeah.
the Conspiracy Corner during the award show.
Nice, nice. Yep, I
Yeah.
love it. All right, so yeah, sure that will be very entertaining, and I can't wait for that. But let's get into the meat of the schedule tonight, so to speak. As I said, we're not going to preview the ACC title game. There's just no point. Clemson's 28-point favorite. They're gonna roll. I think they're gonna probably try to make a statement in this game. Um, so we're gonna preview the four other Power Five conferences. We talked about Cincy and Memphis last week a little bit. If you guys want to know, if you want to get a little more depth in for that game, if you're fans of those teams, you can actually check out last week's pod and check that out. But we're not going to talk about the other games. We have some bets, and when we get into our bets here, we are going to talk a little bit about some Sun Belt, I believe, and then some
Yeah,
match.
some interesting gambling angles to take on the Clemson Virginia game, but
Okay.
really no need to preview that.
Sure. All right, so let's start with Friday night. We've got Pac-12 championship game. We've got Utah fighting for a playoff spot. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they're currently 6.5-point favorites. Is that correct?
6.5-point favorites. Yeah.
Okay, and the total is down to 45.5, I believe, from 50. There is supposed to be there's rain all this week leading up to this game. Swirling winds. They're playing in Levi Stadium, 49er Stadium, and apparently the sod there, the field, it gets really sloppy. So that could affect this game quite a bit. But Tulman, I'll let you start with kind of like what we usually do with either offense or defense, and I'll chime in when need be, I guess.
Sure. I'll go when Oregon has the ball.
Okay.
So I think Oregon's built up a reputation this year for having this great offensive line, and they've got some big names. They're healthy again. They're whole again. I actually looked into their metrics. Offensive line metrics not as great as I thought they would be. They are only 75th in power success rate, going against a Utah defensive line that is 22nd in the country in stuff rate. Look, Oregon in Cristobal's system, Cristobal former, he's a kind of an offensive line guy. Cristobal likes to run the ball. Oregon is only 35th in standard down line yards against a Utah defense that ranks 8th in line yards.
Right.
So, reputation, you'd think Oregon would have an advantage, but I'm not so sure that the metrics bear that out. Justin Herbert, it's not been great in Cristobal's system. I think they could use him more. Maybe the problem there is, wide receivers not getting separation. They have had some guys come on later in the year, especially that transfer from Penn State. But, an interesting stat, Justin Herbert, in the last 2 times that he's faced Utah, completing 66% of his passes for 6 touchdowns and no interceptions. So he's been really good, and Herbert has been really good in his career against Utah. I think the key for Oregon on offense, because I'm not sure they're going to get a lot running the ball, I think that their receivers have to get some separation, and they have to get some explosive plays against a Utah defense that has been good against explosives, but the one time they got exploited was in that Friday night game against USC.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. My biggest thing in this game is kind of what you talked about with Cristobal, and more specifically, Payne and Todd talk about this guy a lot, but Marcus Arroyo, their offensive coordinator, these guys are just overall, the philosophy is way too conservative. It's too predictable on early downs. When you have a first-round quarterback talent in college football, you got to let him throw in this day and age. Passing with how the rules are, it's going to be a little bit more efficient than running. And that's the thing, Tolman, as you point out, is that Oregon O-line versus Utah D-line is pretty much good versus good, right? So it's going to be tough to run the ball on them, even if you are like a pretty good running team, which Oregon's not phenomenal. I mean, you pointed out metrics haven't been as great as far as just pure O-line play. They're 22nd in success rate rushing it. So, I mean, the thing is, they found more success towards the back end of the year. But if you even go to the last 2 games, Arizona State, Oregon State, especially Oregon State, who has a dog shit defense. Oregon didn't play well. That offense did not play very well. And so, with the weather possibly being pretty bad, this is not going to be good for Oregon, I think, because if Utah knows that Oregon can't throw it or they choose not to throw it, and here's the thing, when the weather's really good, Oregon still chooses to not throw it enough. So it's going to be a big challenge as far as like, can the Oregon coaches find their balls, so to speak, like call some first down passes, some play action. See if Herbert's got the arm that he can cut it through wind and rain. This is the way that I think they have to win the game. So I agree with you, Tolman. I think even with the weather, they're going to have to find some success through the air, especially on early downs. And, the thing I picked up on too is that both these teams, as far as like a finishing drive metric, it's basically points per opportunity once you get inside a team's 40. Both teams defensively have been elite this year. I think they're both top 6, but Oregon not quite as good offensively as Utah as far as finishing their drives. Oregon, I don't think they're going to have to – you can't really settle for field goals in this game, especially on that sod with that kind of weather. These teams, I think, are going to have to go for it on fourth down quite a bit. So that'll be interesting to see.
Speaking of, there's going to be like no one at that game. It's already like a hard stadium to get to. It's already a conference that nobody cares about.
Right.
There's nothing going on. I say this every year. There's nothing going on in that area.
Yeah.
It's going to be sad to watch that game on Friday night with the weather and the lack of fans that are going to be there.
Yeah, perfect point. As far as, I guess I'll start with when Utah has the ball. I mean, I think the key here is that I've got Utah as like the 12th ranked team as far as rushing success rate. Oregon 46th as far as their rush D success rate. So I think Zach Moss is going to find some lanes to run in. He might not find a ton of explosive plays, but I think he's going to be able to do enough to keep them kind of guessing. And if the weather's not too bad, I think Huntley has been a pleasant surprise this year. He's been very, very efficient as a passer. Utah's been a surprisingly very good passer.
He ranks first. He ranks first in passer rating in the last 3 games in the country.
Yeah. So I mean, and the thing is, like, we've got teams that are kind of trending in opposite directions. Utah obviously been dominant the last, or really pretty much ever since the SC loss, and they were not the healthiest for a few games even after that. Oregon losing as double-digit faves at Arizona State, just not playing very well offensively the last couple games. As far as the number, Tolman, I think you got
it. I have a little nugget, a fun nugget to add to when Utah has the ball.
Go for it, yeah.
So we like Huntley, we like Zach Moss. They got a guy. He is a kind of tight end H-back hybrid. SNS loves these unknown tight ends, but his name's Brant Keefe. He's averaging 19 yards per touch.
Yeah. And
recently they started letting him carry the ball with creative misdirection plays from kind of like the tight end H-back position.
Okay.
So a couple big plays from him could be a difference in the game for Utah.
Yeah, when I've watched him Utah this year, I've seen him play, and he definitely can make some plays, and he could be a big, I think, matchup nightmare for anybody they play against. So, getting back to the actual line now. Now, you got it at 4, right?
I thought there was good value there. I still think 6.5. I mean, I'm really high on Utah right now. I like what I've seen. I like their metrics.
Yeah.
So I feel good about it, but I think 4 there was a lot of value there.
Yeah, 4 definitely. Where it's at now, I mean, I'm not going to have a play on the actual spread there. If I am forced to choose, I choose Utah. I think we kind of lean towards that in the preview there. But total, I would have loved to have gotten the under at like 49 or better. I actually took the first half under, which I was kind of leaning towards that. And then Todd and Payne came out, and that was their best bet. So I was like, okay, well, then we're kind of thinking the same thing here. Like, these teams, especially Utah, they tend to wear on their opponent in the second half. And so you could see maybe like a backdoor over cover potentially. But I like fresh defenses in the first half and bad weather on a bad field. I think this could be a tougher one to watch. but maybe it'll be fun. Maybe we'll get some
Yeah.
sloppy, weird stuff that happens. And hey,
Yeah. I took that. I took that too. It's not on the dock yet, but 21 and it was on 21 and a half on Bet
yeah,
Online.
yeah,
So
right.
I listened to that. I think I was looking for a total play there, and that seemed to make sense to me.
Yeah. So we seem to think Utah is going to come away as the Pac-12 champion, and definitely going to be right there in the mix for that last spot. With a team that we are now transitioning into, as far as Oklahoma is playing Baylor in the Big 12 championship. This is a rematch of a game they played a few weeks ago, where Baylor got out to a massive lead, kind of a turnover-assisted lead in the first half, and then Oklahoma really turned it on, came back, won that game in pretty dramatic fashion. So, Tulman, I'll let you go again as far as just start with whoever you want when they have the ball.
Sure. Go with when Oklahoma has the ball.
Okay.
So, offense has changed a little bit. They, early in the season, relied on explosives.
Right.
CeeDee Lamb had some health issues, missed a few games. And now they've become this ball control, attack, possession-style offense. In the last 3 games, they are second in the country in team time of possession. So now that they have CeeDee Lamb back, it seems like they can go whatever direction they want. They want to go explosive with CeeDee Lamb. They've shown that they can have success. They want to go ball control. They've shown that they can have success. Really, they can do whatever they want as long as they don't turn the ball over, which we have documented numerous times on this podcast. That is what Jalen Hurts tends to do.
Yeah.
So I think the key for Baylor, Baylor's 20th in the country in sack rate. Oklahoma's offensive line 70th in the country in sack rate. So Baylor's not going to give up explosive plays. They're great there. I think the key is, can they get those sacks and can they avoid quarterback scrambles? Baylor's defense is only 100th in the country rushing yards on passing downs. So
right.
Been vulnerable to the QB scramble. So if they can, clean that up, if they can stop Jalen Hurts with scrambles, maybe they can have success.
Yeah, I actually want to dig a little bit into. I looked at their advanced box score for that last game the first game that they played, and Oklahoma really, that score is just not indicative of the way the game should have gone. I mean, Oklahoma's definitely the better team, hence their 9 point. I believe is that 9? That's what I have it listed as on here.
It's been like oscillating back and forth between 8 and 9.
All right, we'll call it 9 for the purposes of tonight.
Sure.
But Oklahoma, number 1 in the country in rush success rate. Baylor, 43rd defensively, not horrific, but inside the top 50. OU, number 2 in the country in pass success rate. Baylor, 62nd. So here's the thing. Tulman pointed out perfectly that Baylor is elite at stopping explosives. That's because philosophically they're bend, don't break. They're just like Washington, Chris Peterson, Jimmy Lake, who's about to take over there. I don't blame them for that philosophy in college because there's not a lot of quarterbacks that are going to be very, very good down to down. Like college football's not. It's starting to get this way, but it hadn't been as much about efficiency, and so I don't blame Baylor for that. But when you go up against a team that's as elite efficiently as Oklahoma is, until when you pointed out they didn't have CeeDee Lamb that first game, they can ball control if they want to. Hurts can hurt them scrambling. They're
averaging what, 8 yards per play?
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. So here's the thing is that, and Todd and Payne pointed this out, and I was thinking this before I was listening to that pod, is that Baylor cannot afford to let Oklahoma get out to like a very quick double-digit lead or something, because this could get kind of ugly as far as I don't see there being a ton of resistance from Baylor defensively. Like they're gonna have to shut them down when they get into the red area, and that's still a tough ask with Oklahoma. Now, maybe Hurts does shit his pants again, and that's where Baylor is in this game. But let's transition, and we'll talk real quick about when Baylor has the football now. So I'll start here. I think the key is that they need to stay out of obvious passing downs if possible, because Brewer's been pretty good. I don't think he's the type of guy that can just lead like a comeback victory or just lead the team with just his arm. Oklahoma can be had on the ground a little bit. They are 42nd in rush D success rate, 112th in rush explosives given up. So Baylor 26th in the country in rush explosives. I think if Baylor can find some consistent success on the ground, pop off a few runs, that will keep them in the game. That will keep them believing that they can win this game the longer they stay in it. But Tolman, what do you think as far as, is that the key? Like, can Baylor keep up with these guys, or do you feel a little bit stronger about Brewer than what I do?
Yeah, so I thought Brewer had a good start to the season, but he is very, very middling. I think he's somewhere in the 50, 60, 70 range in the country, and passing efficiency in the last 3 games. So he's taken a step back. Baylor's offense wasn't great. They weren't great against that in the last game against Oklahoma. They just benefited from some pretty good field position.
Right.
So they didn't. I think they hit one explosive play, like a nice 30-yard pass to Mims. But outside of that, their running backs they're good, but they don't excite you with explosives. I don't know. I think I'm leaning. I would lean Oklahoma here, but based on Oklahoma's sloppiness and the way that first game went, I'll probably stay away.
Yeah, this number for my ratings is a tad short. Baylor was an 11-point dog at home, and now they're getting 9 on a neutral site. The thing is, I could see Baylor showing up, popping off a couple runs. Hurts, like you said, getting a little sloppy off the ball and keeping Baylor in the game. Oklahoma's shown they can do that with teams this year, but what frightens me a little bit is that I can see OU just not being stopped offensively to where this game could have some blowout potential.
That's what Oklahoma. Oklahoma has the motivation to do that, because I think if Baylor wins, they really don't have a chance to get in, even if they win impressively. I just don't see it happening. But if Oklahoma is very, very impressive and they show that they've cleaned up some things on defense, then they might have a case. Because as a lot of popular analysts are saying, and maybe there's some truth in this, their resume is better, but they just haven't looked as good.
Yeah, so. No, that's going to be the thing. I do think their resume is a little bit better. They just haven't looked as good as Utah. But even if there's not value in this number, maybe there's a way I play them like moneyline parlay with the next team we're going to talk about, which is going to be LSU. And LSU's playing Georgia, obviously, SEC Championship game. I believe that line is at, I think LSU's giving 7.5 right now, maybe 7 in some books.
I've seen 7.5.
Yeah, probably some 7. We'll call it 7. I think I actually have seen more 7. So yeah, I guess I'll start this time. It doesn't really matter, but
sure,
Coleman, I think the big thing for me in this game is that we've talked about these two teams a few times this year. Everybody in the world knows that Georgia defensively, metrically, has been very, very elite. And it's really been their offense that's been the issue. Fromm hasn't been as good. Their receivers are a big part of that reason. They don't get separation. Their best receiver has been in and out of the lineup all year. Lawrence Cager, he's out for this game. You also have Pickens, the young kid he's stepped up the last few weeks. He seems very talented. He got in that fight against Georgia Tech in the second half, got ejected. So he is out for the first half in this game. My main question, Tolman, is can Georgia exploit LSU's 127th ranked pass explosiveness D? The problem is Georgia was only 61st coming into this game, and they're missing their 2 best receivers at least for the first half. So
I'll give you one. So one key stat that my answer is no.
Yeah.
And so credit to Bill Connolly for posting this advanced box score. But last week against Texas A&M, LSU's defense, Texas A&M had a 0% success rate on passing plays on passing downs against LSU's defense last week.
Yeah.
0%. So if I think if Georgia is going to have to get explosive passing plays to keep up with potentially LSU scoring against their very, very good defense, which LSU's offense is so good that I think they can score on that very elite Georgia defense. I just don't see how Georgia's going to get some explosive plays and have success. You know, I haven't seen it all this year. Haven't liked the play calling.
Yeah.
Haven't liked their playmakers at receiver. I don't see it.
Yeah, the only thing I was trying to think about it schematically, like what I would do if I was a coach, and we've talked about this kind of strategy quite a bit, where like I think Georgia would have to implement like some passing plays to these backs and maybe the tight ends. Like LSU's been susceptible in the middle of the field without White this year, but the thing is, like I don't know if they are. We've talked about this all year, Georgia. I don't know if they're going to do that just like Oregon. They're too conservative. I think they're just too afraid of making mistakes. Like it's
they run the fewest plays in the country, or they're like bottom 10 in plays run per game in the country.
Yeah, like
so really, I think their strategy here is hold on to the ball and keep away from LSU, and use their offense, use like ball control to keep LSU's offense off the field. I think that's what they got to go with.
Yeah, I mean they pretty much are like a rich man's Wisconsin basically, and I don't even have power rated that much higher than Wisconsin anyway. But I just think here's the problem too. Just like last year, and Kirby said going into this year that Georgia has not they weren't creating enough havoc. That's all they talked about this offseason. And they're still not really generating a ton of pressure. And Joe Burrow and those LSU receivers, I mean, that's not the offense that you want to just let have all day to find open receivers. I mean, this is not a game that I don't think LSU is going to blow these guys out or anything. If the line 7.5 or 8, I don't think it's like unreasonable to consider Georgia if you like them. But like you said, how are they? I don't see how they can win this game with the like when they get in the red zone. This is the thing too. You don't have your two best receivers. Teams were starting to figure out that Fromm was not going to beat them once they got inside the 40. The field, squeezed down a little bit. They just teams were clamping down in the box on Swift, Harrion. This is going to be a problem. Georgia can't kick field goals in this game. If they kick field goals at any point, I'm just going to announce LSU the winner right then and there. As far as the number, Tulman, like you would lean LSU then probably, right?
I'd lean LSU. I'd think maybe at 6.5, I'd take LSU. But like, I'm just thinking how many points can Georgia score?
I don't know. It's not going to be higher than what 28 would be the absolute max, maybe.
Yeah. So like, if you think the line is right, maybe like you're thinking like a 28-21 game, and like there could be an underplay. But I don't have a confident feel here. Maybe LSU if the line drops a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe under if. But that has not been LSU style this year, so I don't know. I don't have a great feel on this one.
Yeah, I was thinking about it was the same thing with that Pac-12 game. I was thinking about the game total, and then I thought to myself, well, if Cager and Pickens are out for the first half, Georgia's defense will be obviously at its freshest point in the first half there. I think first half under is a decent play. I got it at 27.5. Obviously 28 would have been amazing, but I could see this being a little bit lower scoring, a little tighter first half, and then LSU just is able to make plays in the second half when maybe Georgia's defense is a little bit gassed. Because that's the thing, too, is can Georgia sustain drives, which they've been very good at that this year. But LSU, for all the talk about how LSU doesn't have a defense or they're not as good as they were, efficiency-wise, LSU's been actually fine. I mean, they've been
pretty good in the red zone, too.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I think LSU comes away with an SEC championship here. Good for them. I'm not going to get into whether they or OSU should be the 1 seed. I think you can make arguments for both, but I don't see Georgia winning this game, and I don't see them obviously then making the playoffs. So we can quickly move on now to our last game, which I don't think there's going to be a ton to talk about, but the Big Ten Championship, Ohio State, Wisconsin rematch. Tolman, I'll let you start. I honestly don't have a. I don't think
Yeah.
there's been much that's changed since these two teams played. Do you have any little nuggets or anything you just want to talk about real quick with this game?
Not really. I don't have a ton jotted down for this game either. I thought that Wisconsin was pretty good in the red zone against Minnesota last week.
Yeah.
When Minnesota had been fantastic all year. But I'm not sure what that means.
Right.
Ohio State has shown that they can score from 50 yards out. They've shown that they can, convert in the red zone. So, offensively for Wisconsin, they had some plays last week where they got behind Minnesota's, pretty good secondary and got some big plays in the passing game. So I think that Wisconsin's offense, maybe a little counterintuitive because it's not what they do best, but maybe they should come out firing, see if they can find some success in the passing game, like Michigan did last week. But Michigan exploited, Sean Wade being out, and all reports are saying that Wade's going to be back. So
yeah,
I see this game going very similar to the first time that they played. Maybe Jonathan Taylor can have a little bit of a better game and they can hold the ball longer, but Wisconsin cannot be one-dimensional in this game.
Yeah, I think it's honestly very similar to the Georgia game, and even what we talked about with Oregon offensively, these teams that are just a little bit too predictable on early downs. Now, the thing is with Wisconsin is that recently everybody knows what they want to do, and they're still doing it at an elite level. Taylor's been amazing. The O-line's played better the last few weeks. The thing is, we saw this in round one, and when Wisconsin's had to step up in class, OSU is just too strong and too fast. And I really agree with you. I think Wisconsin, if I'm Paul Chryst, I'm looking for play action, tight ends, fullbacks out of the backfield, first down, and I would do that a lot. I would throw a lot on first down if you're serious about winning this game, because OSU is 100% going to take away Jonathan Taylor. And so if that's the case, Wisconsin needs to, in fact, probably be counterintuitive. Now, the issue is, Wisconsin's been, I think, the beginning of the year when they had all those shutouts against those dog shit offenses, they were obviously an overrated defense. They've still been good. I don't know if they're necessarily elite. The problem with OSU is it's like if you take away Dobbins, they're going to exploit you in the pass game. If you try to settle on these receivers, play a little zone, if you're on your heels a little bit, OSU's shown that they can run the football on anybody in the country. So I agree with you, Tolman, at 16, which is what I believe this line is around, maybe 15 and a half. I've seen in some books now. Obviously, there's some money on Wisconsin. I think most of the tickets from what I've seen are on OSU, so there is a little bit of money on Wisconsin. But if OSU does, in fact, care about margin of victory in this game, like trying to make sure they absolutely lock up that 1 seed, then I think it goes pretty close to round one. I think they run away with it in the second half. So, we seem to think OSU is going to, in fact, win the Big Ten title, probably be the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. But to wrap up
Thanks for not asking me my thoughts on the number because you knew what the answer was.
Yeah, I knew what you were going to say. I didn't. There's no way I need to ask you. I mean, do you have thoughts on the total? Do you care about that at all?
No.
Okay, all right. Let's get into our bets for this week, and that'll wrap up this pod. So why don't you go ahead and start with what you got, man?
All right. So this is my ACC Championship game preview for the week. I don't think we've ever seen this before, but Todd Furman tweeted about it, and I've been thinking this all week. Clemson is going to go through the entire year without having to put a single significant thing on tape. Yes, they had a close game against North Carolina, but that was just kind of a sloppy, sleepy game. Felt like a little bit of a fluke to me. They've been favorites by at least, I think, 15 or 16 and a half in every game that they've played this year. And they're in that same situation against Virginia on Saturday night. So I'm not sure what the motivation is for Clemson to just come out and absolutely stomp Virginia. I can see them getting up to like an early, pretty easy, like 21-0, 28-0 lead. And then I feel like they don't have to do anything else for the rest of the game. They can literally play like big brother and just hold Virginia at arm's length for the rest of the game. So I kind of like the total going under, just because I don't think they're going to they're going to be at this huge advantageous position where they don't have to do anything fancy to get through an entire season undefeated. And I felt like under was the right play there. So maybe something like a 38-10 type game.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like just to add on to that, the fact that if you're Dabo, why even risk getting anybody hurt in the second half of that game when you know you're going to be playing in the college football playoff? So I might try to actually tune into that game and maybe throw out a live like second half Virginia bet, or just even like maybe something like that. I agree. I think they're probably going to take their foot off the gas once they get up. I mean, dude, they could get up like 35-0 first half and still you'd be fine with your under. I mean, I think they're going to try to make.
That's what I'm saying. Is like I feel good about the under because I feel like once they get up by a certain amount, just like I look at it as like just that holding at arm's length. It's like we are controlling this game. We're going to do whatever we want, but we're not going to like rub it in your face because we don't need to, and we don't need to put anything fancy on tape for Ohio State, LSU, whatever to see.
Yeah, so Addison and Corey both have Clemson minus 28. I mean, obviously I could see them covering that, but like you said, for the reasons you said, I'm kind of not, like, that's why I'm staying away from this game, just because, like, if they want to be there every second of the game, I think they should absolutely cover that, but not sure that's going to happen. So why don't you actually give your best bet now?
Sure. So I like Central Michigan -7 MAC championship against Miami, Ohio.
I like it.
Central Michigan. I think from a metric standpoint, they're very good in their line play on both sides of the ball. Miami, not so great. Miami has a very, very good defense, but Central Michigan ranks 10th in the country in explosive drive rate, whereas Miami's defense, 86 in the country against explosives. So chance for Central Michigan to hit some big plays there. Also maybe control the line of scrimmage. I think they cover.
Yeah,
great turnaround story.
Yeah, I definitely would lean them, and a guy that, Jim McElwain, we made some fun of him when he was at Florida, and like that weird picture that was floating around, whether it's him or not him, obviously. But he can coach some offense, and Central Michigan has definitely played a lot better towards the end of the year. They've been pretty good all year, but they've looked quite a bit better at the end of the year here. So I definitely would lean Central Michigan. I kind of have like better's regret where there was an opportunity to grab them at like I think 5.5 or so, but the steam was so quick it was going to be like close to impossible to get that. So
so one other game I think is maybe I'll talk about from a betting standpoint.
Sure.
I got Florida Atlantic. I got our boy Lane Kiffin.
Yeah.
-7 against UAB. I think when I looked into it, I think why the line is there is because from a metric standpoint, UAB is like one of the top defensive lines in the country, and Florida Atlantic has had some issues with protection. They've had some issues with overall line play, but Florida Atlantic's an explosive offense, and UAB, even though they have a great defensive line, they have played the worst schedule in terms of offenses.
Yeah.
I think they actually rank 130th, like in like opponent offensive efficiency played or something like that. That little metric on there. So
right.
to me, that seems a little bit of fraudulent. I think Lane Kiffin. I think the athletes that they have at FAU. they could get a big win in the Conference USA Championship. So I took them.
Yeah, I definitely lean them too. That game could have some blowout potential. UAB, like, yeah, metrically they've been great, but like you said, if you go like opponent adjusted, which I don't really have access to that kind of data this year, I've been trying to look into that, but just kind of looking at it as far as, like you said, just overall strength of schedule, the type of offenses they've played. UAB, to me, I'm still to this day saying that they're fraudulent. So I would definitely lean Florida Atlantic here, but certainly going to be interesting if UAB ends up winning, and then they're just like, well, F all of you. You were all wrong for all 15 weeks this year. So, yeah, I guess I talked about those totals. Oh, a game that you and I both have. Louisiana Lafayette at App State.
Also my best bet, by the way.
Yeah, right. We can have the same best bet, and that's good that we do. I mean, we feel that confident. It's the only game all week that I felt like there was a lot of value in the line. I have this game pretty much like pick. Another respected bettor that I know has it like 1.5. SP Plus has it 3.5. So I mean, we have a lot of value here at really like 6 and up. I finally found a 7 on maybe Tuesday morning, and it was minus 115. So I was like, I will take the cheap 7. I already loaded up at 5.5 at 6. Some on the money line. App State horrendous at not allowing, or essentially horrendous at rush explosive defense. Louisiana, one of the best rushing offenses in the country. They can pop explosives at any point. Definitely the much better team as far as special teams is concerned. Also, they played this year. Louisiana got a little bit of revenge factor here. I actually like them to win this game outright. Tulman, obviously, you feel very strongly about them. Anything you want to add?
No, I agree. I agree with everything you said. Those were my reasons. I think they'll win outright too.
Okay, awesome. So as far as, let's see, Corey's got Utah -6. He likes OSU -16. I mean, I think we've covered those. We lean that way. So yeah, that should actually wrap up this conference championship preview. I think a lot of chalky stuff. We don't really feel great about the dogs in any of these spots. Tulman, real quick, before we do officially wrap it up, I mean, of not the ACC game, but of the 4 games we previewed, which dog would you give the best chance to win outright?
Georgia.
Yeah, and like it's so ridiculous because like if people rewind, they'll be like, "You guys gave Georgia no chance when you previewed it," but Georgia does have a lot of 5 and 4 stars on that roster. Their defense is very good. Maybe
it's like a couple podcasts ago, I talked about why I took like Iowa -2.5 against Minnesota. Minnesota up to that point had a lot of its success, and then they were going up against a team style that they just really hadn't faced all year.
Yeah,
I think you could say the same thing for LSU, like playing Georgia, just a style that they haven't faced all year. So if they struggle, what are they going to do? You know?
Yeah, and maybe Auburn put out a little bit of a defensive blueprint to where it keeps Georgia in that game. I do think Georgia's going to have to like get some turnover luck, or like, you know how Urban talks about like stealing possessions at some point. But I agree. I think Georgia has the best chance. I don't feel very strongly about Oregon. Obviously, I don't think Wisconsin has any chance to win, and then Baylor not in love with them. So yeah, I agree, man. Georgia is probably the moneyline dog I would consider if I had to pick any of them, but I don't think they win the game. So yeah, if you guys have like usual any comments or anything, ship them in the comment section below. And as always, I will have our up-to-date records against the spread in the info section, and I'll have our bets for this week. We don't have a lot, but obviously we do have some, and maybe we'll add some. Tolman has a few more that he didn't mention, but we're kind of running out of time here, so if you guys want to check those out, you'll have to go to that info section. But like we said, we will be back for bowl season. We're going to have an award show probably within the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, till next time.